I think we are coming on now. All right, we should be good. Hello, everyone. Just going to give another minute, let everybody finish jumping in, and then we will get started. All right. All right. Well, let's go ahead and kick this off. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. Joseph, myself, and the entire Osgar team would like to say thank you for joining us today for our second webinar. We named this webinar Don't Modernize Until You Can Confidently Answer These 7 Questions. Because we know most IBM environments don't lack answers, they lack complete ones. So one of the reasons why Osgar exists is to end that uncertainty and making a modernization project a real viable option for companies now that you have a tool like Osgar that can provide that detailed information of your system. So before we get started, a quick introduction to start us off. My name is Robert Maratti. I am the Vice President of Sales in North America, and I am joined by our product lead, Joseph Schaefer. I have a small presentation that kind of lays the foundation of what Osgar does, and it's going to help understand what you'll be seeing from Joseph. We're going to review the 7 questions that we speak of, and in between the questions, we'll do a couple questions, and then Joseph will jump in and show you how Osgar handles those couple questions. We will put up a few polls throughout the webinar. We would love your feedback. We would love your participation in it. It really helps us design these webinars for the future. So it'd be greatly appreciated if you can just give them an answer. And then stick around at the end because there is one final poll, and we'll be picking a person from that specific poll to give away a prize at the end. So let's go ahead and now jump into what you'll be leaving with after you attend this webinar. So 7-question readiness checklist. Before you go ahead and think about starting that modernization project, here's some things you need to be concerned about. What does an actual good answer look like? Not just an answer. It's got to be a good answer. It's got to have a source of truth behind it. It's got to be, it's got to have the evidence to support it. So that's what we mean by a good answer. Joseph is going to give live examples. And then at the very end, there'll be a link that pops up at the bottom. You can click on. It's a downloadable reference file of this webinar. It's okay if you don't click that because we will email it to everybody afterwards as well. So like I said a minute ago, we put up some polls. So let's go ahead and put up the first poll of the webinar. And this kind of just helps us understand who we're talking to. So what best describes your role with legacy complex applications? Give everybody a quick 10 seconds or so. It should have popped up there on your screen. I see some answers coming in now, so that's great. Give it another 5 seconds. All right. Consultant, partner, developer, engineer, architect, just here to learn. Hey, that's great too. Okay, fantastic. All right, so we can go ahead and end that voting, and let's now jump into some more information. So we always like to share statistics that we see out there, and this is kind of a statistic that we've been monitoring for a pretty long time. 74% of organizations fail to complete a legacy modernization project. Why is it? Did my screen stop sharing, Joseph?
Yes, you're not sharing, Robert.
Okay, 1 second. My apologies. Let me go ahead and bring that back up. All right, let me know when you can see that.
I can see it.
Okay, perfect. So 74% of organizations fail to complete a legacy modernization project. And the modernization fails when clarity shows up too late, right? So the things you see in purple here on this iceberg image, system blockers, hidden dependencies, undocumented logic, these are all the things that pop up and will typically make a modernization project fail. Now, the question a lot of people always ask is, hey, can AI fix this? Well, AI increases speed only when context is clear and verifiable. And without the verified context, speed turns into risk and rework. And when it comes into that increased speed, that's where Oscar comes in. And it's going to give that clear and verifiable, very detailed information. So let's set a few guardrails before we get into the 7 questions. We spoke earlier about providing good answers, right? So what counts as a good answer? One being, let it be specific, right? To a real workflow or a change request, not just a generic architecture statement. Make sure it's complete, enough to act on. A partial list or a paragraph is usually not enough, especially if the team still cannot scope from that answer. Explorable. Your team always should be able to drill down from a summary to proof without starting over. Verifiable. Every answer should be grounded in source, objects, data, jobs, or known artifacts. Cross-functional. Answers should be understandable. It doesn't matter who it's to, whether it's someone in the IT department, developer, architect, ops manager, or C-level executives, or someone else in the company. Everybody has to be able to understand it. And then lastly, current. A stale document is usually never a good answer. The answer must reflect what actually runs today. And then another guardrail we want to set is basic considerations before the modernization. So know why the project exists. Tie every decision to a business outcome. Why, if we do this, what's going to be the outcome? How's it going to help us? Protect continuity. Protect business continuity with a phased delivery, safe slices, and rollback. Ensure team alignment. Make sure everyone's on board. I know we all have a wish list, but we don't ever want to see a project start that just a couple people want to do and it's not a team effort. Build security and compliance. These are critical items. Ensure they are in place from day one, and then ensure right mindset. Unknown is not safe. Unknown needs evidence. So let's go ahead and jump to those 7 questions that you need to have answers before starting modernization. And that quote there at the bottom, the goal is to not know everything. The goal is to know enough with proof to make the first move safely, reduce risks, reworks, and keep the business running. Before I get to my first question, I have another poll for you here. Where are you right now in your business? Maybe it could be exploring modernization. You might be in the middle of one. Give everybody a quick 10, 15 seconds to give that an answer. Okay, a few answers are coming in saying people are planning or exploring a modernization. Okay. Preparation for AI enablement. Great. Okay. All right, great. Mostly maintenance. All right, perfect. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into those 7 questions. Let's start with the first one. First one is around end-to-end reality, right? What does the system do end-to-end? And where is it safe? Where is a safe small slice to start and why? Why it's important, any local change can break unseen chains. Insights here is see the big picture, the functional areas, and the business logic. Identify critical workflows before the components. Analyze the system map and complexity levels. Include batch jobs and manual steps. And then, like I said before, find that small slice with a low blast radius and easy rollback and observable outcomes for the first move. Some of the common traps here are starting from components, not workflows, or relying on the visible user interface to handle it. Second question is around business rules. Where are critical business rules enforced? Why this matters? Rules are rarely live in one enforcement point. So if you miss one point, the new system behaves differently or it can cause issues down the road for somebody else. Insights, it lists all the critical rules, pricing, discount, override, etc. Find every enforcement point, whether it's programs or tables. Look for the exceptions, the override flags, the emergency paths, and then require that source of truth for every location claimed. Some of the common traps here are finding one location and missing others. Ignoring that batch logic triggers table driven rules or manual overrides. And then describing a syntax without explaining business meaning. Now, I'm going to stop here with these first two questions. I'm going to hand it over to Joseph, and he's going to give you an example in the Osgar platform on how we handle these two questions.
Thank you, Robert. All right, I'm sharing now my screen. Yeah, let's talk about getting an idea of the end-to-end reality of an application. I mean, doing a modernization project, it's important at the beginning to just understand what the application, how the application is composed or what it consists of. And so that especially when you're new to the application and you're not very familiar with the application. I like here the comparison to when you would do a journey to a place you have never been before, and you go somewhere, and it's we all know Google Maps that helps you to open up a new city that you have never been before, to explore opportunities and things you can do there, and also you understand better the risks and opportunities at the same time. So you need something that opens up the application for you, and there are different ways you could do this, and I give you some ideas on how you could do this with Oscar or any type of AI tool. It's not just limited to Oscar. So what you currently see here is the Oscar dashboard. And in Oscar, when you load the code base and the metadata for a database into Oscar, you would get a functional areas overview. So you have an idea of what's actually going on in your application. And we see here this application, for example, has a project time and task management, and there is a human resource workforce automation, on employee attendance and leave tracking, and the invoice and inventory processing. And in Oscar, when you click on one of these items, you get more information, like what are the functionalities, the main programs, the tables, the entities behind there. Entities are very important in Oscar. These are usually the business terms that are used to describe business objects. This is very, Oscar does entity extraction, which is very relevant for answering questions that you might have accurately. Yeah, so this is functional areas is one way to approach this. So functional areas can have also life cycles or diagrams that you can look at and you can dive into. What you see here, all these pages are heavily linked with hyperlinks. These point usually to the source. So this is how Oscar stays grounded to your application. It's not just high-level information. You don't know where it comes from. It's always heavily linked, whether it's on a documentation page or also was in the chatbot, what you see here on the right side. When you start digging into information for your modernization project, you might ask things like, list me the main customer tables so I have an idea which tables are relevant. And Oscar, would you give you information like you see here on the right side, and with links to more information. For example, here are tables listed, and you click on these links and you would get information about a documentation page for that table with complete information on table fields. And there's also a documentation page that gives you accurate information then with diagrams on further information on common queries for that table. So you can use visualizations to get an end-to-end reality, or the chatbot. You can ask questions that give you that information. Within Oscar, there's also a data view. We call it data model visualization, where you can get an idea from a data model perspective, or from a data perspective. And usually applications have thousands of tables, and here the challenge is often how you find the relevant ones for my modernization project. And that's why we introduced in OSCA a filter in natural language where you just say what you want. So for example, I'm interested in customer master information, and I just say this in my text field and apply a filter, and OSCA filters down that information to the right tables and views that are relevant to what I'm interested in. Yeah, so here I see a couple of tables that for customer master, and I can use this then as an entry point to get more information just by clicking on that information to look further into details. Now, Robert mentioned before also business rules. So usually we talk here about processes and business rules. Within OSCA, this is typically, you see these process and business rules on documentation pages. However, you can ask directly also in the chatbot for this kind of information. So I show here, for example, information on the right side, so to show a workflow and business rules about invoicing, and OSCA will provide you that information and give you a diagram of, let's say, invoicing. You can further look at this diagram to get an idea how the invoicing works, and see the steps that of the invoicing process. Also, business rules are summarized, and for example, how validations work and what actually is validated, and again with links to sources where this is actually implemented. So for example, here for outgoing invoice validation process, so I can click on it and see the code for the validation, and I can directly see this, how this is actually implemented. All right, this should be these are some examples how OSCA covers these two questions that Robert mentioned, but there are many other AI tools out there that can achieve these questions in different ways. But I hope I gave you a bit an idea on how you can approach these two questions using visualizations, using documentation pages, or the chatbot directly. It depends a bit on your prefer to work with AI tools, or your preference on how do you want to see information, which option you might want to use. And I give back to Robert for more questions.
Perfect. Thank you, Joseph. Okay, so let's jump to our third question. So, third question is around blast radius, right? If we change X, what else will it affect? What will it really affect too? Like, this is not hypothetical. You know, a lot of times when we meet with companies, it's a lot of hypothetical talk, but we really do need to know, hey, if something changes, we understand what that change is going to fix, but what else is it going to affect? So why it's important. Impact hides in jobs, reports, integrations, and timing, and many won't show up in a simple call graph. Insights, right? Start with direct callers, file references, jobs, etc. Find the indirect impacts, reports, extracts, APIs. Check timing, sensitive areas, and recurring incidents. Mark what is confirmed and what is still uncertain, and then define the minimum safe test scope and rollback needs. So some of the common traps: stopping at who calls who, treating unknown as no impact, and then doing impact analysis without turning it into test decisions. Our fourth question is around true dependencies. What are the true dependencies, technical and behavioral? So why? Technical dependencies are the easy part. The hidden behavioral couplings show up during migration. So some of the insights: map structural and behavioral dependencies. check the library lists, assumptions, scheduler, and runbooks, and then tag high-risk dependencies for cutover and testing. Traps here are showing only a call graph and then ignoring the operational knowledge because it's not in the code. Our fifth question here comes around core versus derived data. So what data is core versus derived, and where does it flow? So why it matters is moving a wrong source could equal a silent corruption. So insights, identify system of record versus derived / rebuilt data. Map where critical data originates, transforms, and is consumed, and then check the business validations and reconciliation needs. Some of the common traps, treating every file / table as equally important, and then moving data structures before understanding the origin of the business meeting. And I'm going to go ahead and stop here for those last three questions. I'm going to give it back to Joseph so he can show you how Oscar handles these three questions.
Thank you, Robert. Sharing my screen again. All right, back to the Oscar dashboard. I have prepared now on the chatbot window a typical question that you would ask when you're interested in examining a blast radius. And typically, when you do that, you're interested in the impact when you change a certain object, how it impacts other objects. Other objects could be other files or other programs, other tables. And so there is always this challenge to figure out what a change, how the change propagates issues to other parts of the code base. And here's an example. For example, let's say we want to change a table. Let's say we want to add a field or maybe change a data type. How would that impact the code or other sources? And I could, in Oscar, just ask things like these sources or files that use table SGCU00. What is a table that is used by a lot of sources? When you ask such a question, Oscar gives you a complete list of sources that actually use that table. Under the hood, this is not just generated by an LLM, and it's actually, we use here a concept called power tables that give you a correct, accurate, complete list. And this list is presented in the chatbot output, where you see where you could have thousands of items, and where you can then also click on the link here, where you get links also to the actual sources, and you get the entire list of the result. You could copy this to your clipboard, or you could export it as a CSV file and use it as input for other automation. So this is how Oscar handles dependencies and when you do blast radius analysis. Critical here is when you ask that question, let's say multiple times, LLM tend to give you always a different answer, right? And in Oscar, we really solved the problem with Power Table, that you can ask this type of questions and you get the same accurate answer, and the answer doesn't change then over time, depending on how you ask or when you ask the question. I'm just waiting here briefly for the result so that we can verify that. So we see here, we get the same result with 52 rows like what we have seen before. All right, so this is blast radius. Dependencies can happen in many different ways. There is dependencies between source code artifacts. There might be dependencies to services and jobs that you have built. And I want to give you another way that you can look, the way you could look at these dependencies. So for example, when a lot of applications have jobs, and in Oscar, you can get for every job a nice summary when the job is scheduled, and a documentation page what the job is actually doing with a a visualization of what is executed inside the job. But there is also what we call a knowledge graph, where you can look at all the dependencies that we have stored in the backend of Oscar, so we can see what is there actually behind this job. And we see here there's a certain program, and we can expand this program and see which objects are actually impacted. And we see here the green items are database tables, and there is a view, a database view, and we can look at these items. This is something like the Google Maps when you explore a new place. So you actually see what are you getting into? What are the risks that might be there when you change a certain object? And the knowledge graph is a good visualization of what are things that could be impacted that you maybe even not aware of. And all these objects, by the way, you can always click on any of these items. You can jump then right away to a documentation page then to see more information about it. This is true dependencies. And then one question, that the last question before that Robert mentioned is, what if I have a question that where I have some existing data and I want to derive some data from it, and I want to mention here an example that maybe I want to create a new employee bonuses table, and I'm interested now in how I relate this table and how I create the employee ID in this table, and what data type should I use, and what are other tables where that I should consider when creating this employee bonus table. And I could ask question like this here. I want to create a new table for employee bonuses. Which table is the right one to get the employee ID from? And when I ask such a question, Oscar would tell me which is the most relevant table to get this employee ID. In this case, it would be SGT M00, SPG team information, and there is a certain column that I should use for the employee ID. Please note also this column, as you can see here, is very cryptic, and it's not really says anything about employee ID. It has employee ID, but it's Oscar gives you always a nice description of any table in the chatbot output or anywhere where this column name is mentioned. All right, this is the last question that Robert mentioned, and Robert has more questions that we want to go through, and I give back to Robert.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Joseph. Okay, so let's move on to question 6. Integrations plus contracts. What external integrations exist? Which are real, and what contracts do they rely on? So, why this is important? Integrations are fragile and depend on timing and format. So, tiny changes can break interfaces or cause serious headaches. Insights, build an interface inventory. So, APIs, MQ, file drops, etc. Capture the contract format and schema, and then timing and schedule, required fields, error handling. Identify owners and consumers, who depends on it and who notices breakage, and define minimum validation, so smoke tests and reconciliation checks. Common traps, focusing only on APIs and missing file exchanges or repeat consumers, and then missing undocumented integrations. And then lastly, 7, active versus dead. And this is all based around AI noise, right? So what's active, what's dead, what's a duplicate, what's unused. The reason why this question is so important is because when we are discussing AI, AI is not something that's cheap. I think that's a pretty well-known thing. Everyone knows that. And then you don't want to be sending, dead code or unused code or duplicate code to the AI engine and burning tokens. So once again, why? Is because migrating dead code wastes budget. Feeding it to the AI creates noise and hidden cost. So some of the insights: shape and use a ranked inventory, active, inactive, unknown. Find a duplicate or suppress logic and artifacts. Cross-check recurring incidents, fragile areas, and knowledge gaps, and then create a do not migrate list. And then, if it's going on the do not migrate list, just have proof on why it's being put on there. Common traps we see is deleting or migrating based on assumptions, treating unknown as safe to ignore, which is always the wrong thing to do, and then feeding everything into tools and hoping relevance ranking will solve it, which we all know typically it won't do that. So don't just assume that. So I'll go ahead and let Joseph now show you how Oscar handles these last two questions.
All right, thank you, Robert. All right, let's talk about integration. That's always a common area for modernization projects. So in OSCA, integrations surface in different ways. Every integration that OSCA recognizes, there is a documentation page on it. Here, for example, there's an own section in the documentation about external integrations. You see here this application has a Jira integration, a HiRise integration, an email server integration, and so on. All these things are surfaced from the code, from the configuration application has, and OSCA creates a documentation page on it. So, for example, here we see the Jira and Tempo integration. Tempo, by the way, is so a common, well-known solution in Jira for time tracking. And when this documentation page is created, you see then information about the program that is used for the integration. And there is also a workflow for the integration. And when we look at this a bit, you can see here there is a job executed for the Jira integration, and the job calls a service program, and the service program calls some subroutine, and the subroutine then stores database information in database tables. And finally, and also when there are errors, then there are information logged in the error log. And finally, there's a notification program that is called to send notifications. So you get a bit an idea how this integration actually works. There is the main programs are shown here, like the Java, the Jira API client. There's a REST client. You can always click on the program and then actually look at the program itself, also at the source code. And there are also the database tables that are listed out and so on. So this is always, the information presented is always grounded in the actual artifacts of the application. You could also, these are documentation pages that OSCA generates, but you could also use directly the chatbot to ask questions, and you could ask things like, explain me what we do with Jira, and explain the use cases, and you get then similar information. And also the chatbot output will show links to tables and programs that are actually relevant. And you see here there's time tracking mentioned, and there is Jira project and account synchronization mentioned. So there are all these use cases that are covered by the Jira integration, and with a nice summary of the tables and the programs. So this is about integrations. Robert has also mentioned dead code and inactive objects. This is something we do in OSCA when we load a new project, that we look at objects that are actually used, and we identify the ones that have no references or haven't been used for a long time, so that we can remove these objects. This is very common in AS400 application, that there are a lot of objects that are not used anymore, And we have in Oscar a dedicated view for inactive objects where you can look at these objects and you can see which ones are active and which ones are not active. You see here, for example, quite a number of sources and programs and tables and views that are not used and anymore. We have here over 50% that are of the sources that are not used anymore. Just as an example, similar with the tables that are not used anymore. And this helps to reduce costs, helps to reduce also the noise in the data, in the data, in the responses of Oscar, and to get more accurate answers. Especially when you do modernization, you don't want to modernize something that is not used anymore. And so Oscar will automatically remove that noise from you. All right. Yeah, and in this view, you see everything that got automatically identified as inactive and not used. At any point in time, you can also say something that was maybe you have special knowledge and can decide there's something here that is inactive, but you want to change this as active. You can change it at any point in time. So you can manage what is active and inactive, and so you're fully in control of that. All right, this is everything I wanted to show you for inactive object and dead code, and I want to give back to Robert.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Joseph. All right, so let's go ahead and get another poll up on the screen here. So poll number 3, what's your biggest modernization blind spot? I'll give everybody here a good 10, 15 seconds to throw in some answers. Try to read some as they come in. Business rules are scattered, hidden dependencies, data meaning and end-to-end flows. Couple answers there. Okay. Good participation here in this poll. All right. Looks like the winner here was data meaning and end-to-end flows, although hidden dependencies also. Okay, great. Awesome. Thank you for your participation there in that one. Greatly appreciate. So just to finish off this presentation before we open it up to questions, and don't forget, if you have questions, please post them in the question box there in the chat. So when we say how to get good answers in practice, Oscar is going to give you the clarity for that critical code. What do we mean by critical code, right? So long-running applications, this could be, aging application like RPG or COBOL, complex systems, spaghetti code type systems, and then big monoliths, right? Big Java systems or one big single application that has everything tied to it. And Oscar is going to be that clarity engine, right? The trusted context and proof for humans and AI. We are going to give you evidence-linked system truth, which is going to, in return, give you faster decisions, fewer surprises, and really just make your just business flow smoother and your system run smoother and giving you the knowledge that you need, being that one source of truth. So this image here kind of illustrates what we see in our conversations with companies, critical systems and the unclarity in a black box. And that box on the left looks a little rough, right? And that's because it's unclear. So what are some of the things that we see the most? People change in onboarding, right? Tribal knowledge and a high, business continuity risk shows up. Change requests or DevOps, struggling with impact analysis tools to ensure hidden dependencies are not being missed. Incident recovery and continuity, hours of manual investigations and asking others. This and people changing onboarding are probably the two biggest ones that we see. Integrations and M&A. So no source of truth for due diligence and no standard protocol for integrations. Compliance and audit. Outdated, poor documentation. This is another big one, right? We speak to companies all the time. I spoke to one the other day, and they discussed how they were lucky enough to have documentation, but the last time it was updated was about 2001. So that could cause serious issues. Modernization and migration, unknown coupling leading to high failure risks. And then lastly, that AI engagement, right? High cost of the risk of trial and error, usually leading to initial excitement and then an early frustration because a lot of that comes around the dead code and making sure it's being filtered and not sending bad information to the AI engine. But as you can see now, Oscar comes into play. We provide that clarity. Now you see the box on the left is nice and shiny and bright and looks new. And how are we doing it? When it comes to people change and onboarding, we provide visible, shareable business logic, no bottlenecks, and focused on core team. Change requests in DevOps, we provide clear hidden dependencies and a why, not just the dependencies. We also give the why. And then less rework and regressions. Incident recovery and continuity, faster investigations, and then fewer escalations. Evidence linked paths. Integrations and M&A, we do the pre-change certainty and then evidence-based decisions. Compliance and audit, we can provide the smart documentation and then enrich that by diagrams and power tables. Modernization and migration, avoid those surprise blockers. So start with the right slice. And then as far as AI agent, less noise, trusted context for AI, less hidden costs and rework. And like I said, this could be your knowledge hub, right? You don't have to rely on always finding someone or going to someone. You have a tool here where you can simply ask it a question like Joseph did, and it's going to give you that full context and trusted answer. What we always tell companies is don't change to understand, understand to then change. And this leads us with our quote here. This is from one of the managing directors at Wolfgang Schauer. In just a few weeks, Osgard delivered more relevant insights than we'd gained in years. So with AI on the rise and faster integrations becoming the norm, clarity is really no longer optional for critical systems. It's extremely important. So I will go ahead now and open this up to questions. Let's see if there are any that need our attention immediately here. I'm just looking at another screen here. Let's see. So we have one question here. Joseph, which LLMs would you recommend for Osgar in terms of efficiency, cost, and security? And what deployment options are available?
Yeah, so with Oscar, we have made a lot of good experience using the OpenAI models, and we OpenAI models have one of the most mature models that we have seen, and so this is our recommendation to use the OpenAI models. We are also supporting and experimenting with models of other AI providers like Claude, like Gemini. But so far, for the Oscars, we see that especially when there's auto documentation and so on, the AI models are the best. Claude will be interesting now more for code generation. There's a special strengths that the Claude provides us, and we are currently also looking into supporting Claude anytime soon. Claude is one thing I may want to mention here also is that Claude models are much more expensive than OpenAI, and this is also a factor that we consider when we provide this information to you, that we do this in a cost-effective way.
Perfect. Awesome. Looks like we have another question here. Will IBM's Bob be able to access the information Osgar compiles?
The answer is yes. So we are currently actively working on exposing Oscar as an MCP server, and IBM Bob is able to integrate with MCP. So the goal here is that to improve the quality and accuracy of tasks that IBM Bob is doing. This could be task for modernization, for code generation, for any kind of task that you would do with IBM Bob. So we see a world where Oscar and IBM Bob complement each other and can support each other. And I think the big strengths that we have in Oscar, that we have this knowledge hub, this knowledge base in the backend, and we can use that to provide a rich context to AI tools like Bob. And IBM Bob is just an AI tool that can leverage the information from Oscar, and we are planning to integrate also with other AI tools, not just IBM Bob.
Perfect. Okay, we have another. So we have another question coming in here now. What deployment options are available?
Yeah, deployment options is Oscar can be installed on premise and in the cloud. The Oscar typically is installed close to the source system so that the AS400 system can be easily accessed. So this is by far the preferred option customers use and do. But Oscar can also install it in the cloud when this is a requirement. Besides running the Oscar service itself, Oscar is then using also an LLM service, and the LLM, as mentioned before, we have OpenAI as our preferred model.
And we got another one here. As it's been known, AI can sometimes struggle with interpreting different formats, whether it's PDF, XLSX, DocX, XML, RPG, and different databases. So how does Oscar ensure complete understanding of all the artifacts, and what audit/proof of understanding exists to ensure complete information?
A good question. So there is this is something that is an important question for companies that use different frameworks or artifacts that are not so common. I think this is the reason of the questions of this question. Oscar out of the box supports the common artifact types of any RPG application. This is like anything that is in control language or written in RPG, and anything that is supported by IBM, Oscar will support. However, there are also frameworks like that are provided by other vendors, and there are artifacts that are more custom, and we are currently trying to find a good way to have good parsers for these artifacts so that we can support these artifacts out of the box. These artifacts are currently already supported, but we want to have Oscar to have a deep understanding of also custom artifacts, and this is something we are continuously working on, and to support, to have such support. So there is, when you have a specific framework, please talk to us, then we can let you know whether Oscar has deep support for that or not. And we are also happy to collect customer feedback to support also new frameworks that we haven't seen before. And this is something we want to expand the Oscar platform over time to be as complete as possible.
And then I guess a follow-up question to that, Joseph, is what LLM training has to happen to make it work well?
So Oscar is a RAG solution, a retrieval augmented generation solution, where there is no training of a model. Oscar, the way Oscar works is we store the information in the knowledge base and we prepare the data accordingly. You can see this like a mini data warehouse about your code base. And when you have a chatbot question or when you generate a documentation page, we have an intelligence that automatically finds the relevant artifacts in the knowledge base and feeds these documents then, or these artifacts on the fly to the large language model to generate the final answer. With this approach, we are very flexible to have always the latest and greatest information available. And also, we don't have to continuously train new models, which usually is very expensive and more difficult to achieve, and you need more hardware to train new models. But with the retrieval augmented generation approach, you don't run into that problem, and you still have always the latest and greatest information that is stored in the knowledge base is always reflected in the answers that you get from the LLMs.
All right, and we have one last question here. If I have 10,000 tables and suspect that some of them have not been used for a long time, would Osgard be able to cover such an application and identify the unused objects? And then the same question applies to logical files and programs.
Yes, the answer is yes. We discover unused tables, views, programs, jobs, display files. So they're very common artifacts. And there we have customers that have over 100,000 tables that where there's usually a huge number of these tables or programs that are not used, and there's a huge opportunity to save a lot of money for to not process these unused objects in any way, and whether it's AI processing or to maybe do migration and modernization projects. So can be useful in many ways.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, that was great participation there in the questions. And then finally, I'll put up our last poll. What would you like to do next? So I'll give everybody some time here to answer that last question. Let's see. Got some people coming in now with their answers. Let's give this poll a last few minutes here. We got some folks who are still answering. Okay. Another 10 seconds. Okay. All right, awesome. Well, everybody, that is the end of our second webinar. Like I said in the beginning, on behalf of Joseph, myself, and the entire Osgard team, we very much appreciate you joining us today. Don't forget, there's that link there at the bottom. You can download this entire thing right now. Should be a purple link in the bottom of your screen. It's okay if you don't click it. We'll be able to email everybody the copy of the recording and everything. But thank you again. We hope you have a great rest of the week, and be on the lookout for our next webinar, as these are going to be a continuous thing for us here at Osgard. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joseph, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.